Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video in the Python series. In this video, I'll be teaching you about how to pass parameters to functions in Python. Okay guys, so the last episode we created this very simple function here that is able to calculate the sum of two numbers, so adding two numbers together and then printing out the result. That in itself is pretty useful just because then we can call this function anywhere in our code, which is nice, but it's also not very useful because the numbers that are being added is hard-coded. So it's actually pretty limited because we can only calculate the sum for two numbers. It's not going to be dynamic. So it would be nice if we can pass in two numbers to our function dynamically as input, and then it will calculate the sum for those two numbers and then print it out. So in this case, what we can do is change our function to accept parameters. So a parameter is an input to your function that you can then use within the body of your function, within the code of your function to do different stuff with. So in this case, we have num1 and num2. They have two hard-coded values. What we want to do is have these passed in as input to our function so that we can calculate the sum for those two thingies, okay? So what we're going to do is delete this. So up here, if we zoom in a little bit, inside of the definition for our function at the very top, we have these parentheses here, right? So these are actually here for a reason. This is where you specify the parameters for your function, so the values that are passed in. So in this case, we have num1 and then num2. So now, as you can see, the errors went away. Whenever you call the add function, you have to pass in num1 and num2, so two values that will go into these two variables, and then you can use these two variables as you see down here inside of your function to do different stuff. So in this case, let's say that we want to call the add function, right? As we're doing down here. So now we can pass in 5 and 6 as arguments for these two parameters, and I'll explain that more in a second. And it should now do the same thing as it did before. It should add 5 and 6 and print the result. So if we run this, we get adding 5 and 6, result is equal to 11. Awesome. So if we change this, now we do, let's say we do 50 and 12, we should get 62. So run this and we get 62. So now, as you can see, our function is now dynamic. You can pass in two different numbers that's not hard-coded within the function itself. So to add these two numbers, whatever you pass in, it'll add them and then print it out, which is very nice. So now wherever we want to add two numbers, all we have to do is call our custom-made add function and pass in those two numbers. It'll add it for us and it'll print it out for us, which is very nice. Now let's get very specific on what this terminology here means, what I mean by parameters and arguments. So first we have parameter and then we have argument. So in an everyday circumstance, when you're just talking about your code, it's okay to use these two terms interchangeably, but it's also important to note the difference. Okay, so a parameter is the variable that is used in the function definition. In this case, we have two parameters. We have num1 and num2. So these two variables here are actually created whenever we call the add function. So every time we call add, these two variables are created, and whatever is passed in as arguments will be set as the value for these parameters. So that brings us to the argument definition. The argument definition says the value that is passed into the function when it is called. So in this case, our two arguments is 50 and 12. So these arguments are set as the values for num1 and num2. So whenever we use num1 and num2 within the body of our function, it is actually talking about 50 and 12, whatever the values are that were passed in as arguments. So they're very, very similar, but they are different. So the arguments is the actual values that you pass into the function when calling it. The parameters are the variables that are created when calling the function that contain the values of the arguments that you passed in, okay? And now let's go ahead and check out how we can go ahead and improve our factorial calculating function that we made last episode as well. So in the last episode, we made a function that calculates the factorial for a number. So we have hard-coded number is equal to 50, or 500 rather in this case. And then what we will do is get numbers 1 through 500 and multiply them all against each other, and that will be the factorial. And it will print out the factorial. And this is nice, very cool, but again, the same problem exists where it is not dynamic in nature. So the value that you're calculating the factorial for is actually hard-coded into the function definition, which is not very fun because now you can only calculate the factorial for the number 500 instead of, passing in whatever number you want. So what we can do now is change this to num as the parameter. And now, whenever you call calculate factorial, you're going to pass in an argument to this parameter, and that will be what you calculate the factorial for. So very, very easy change, but it's actually very powerful. So now we can run calculate factorial. We can do 5, which we know should be 120. So run this. and we get the factorial 5 is 120. So it's simply going to use that parameter, calculate the factorial for it, and then print out the result as we tell it to right here. So we can do that for a bunch of different numbers. So we can do the factorial of 200. Should be a massive number. There we go. We get a massive number here. And yeah, pretty cool, right? Pretty easy. So we're simply modifying our current functions to accept parameters or accept arguments for our parameters. And then we can use those parameters within our functions to run some code with them, right? So our functions are now more dynamic because they can accept any value, and those values can be used within the functions without exactly knowing what those values will be ahead of time. So what I mean by that is, whenever you're defining the add function here, you don't know what num1 and num2 can contain. It can be any number, and that's really good because now it can accept any number and calculate the sum for any number. You shouldn't have to hard code it, which is it's not very useful if it's hard coded, right? You should be able to pass in any number and then get any sum, which is very nice, okay? Anyway, so hopefully that makes sense. Now you can create functions in Python, and now you can pass in parameters and arguments to those functions, which is very nice. And in the next episode, I'll be showing you how to return values from functions, which is going to make it even more powerful, okay? So stay tuned, and hopefully you've been learning a lot so far. Alright, so that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. In the description below, I'll leave a link to the code for this episode, so you can check it out. You can bookmark it, come back to it later. If you forget any concepts or you just want to review the concepts I taught in this video, I'll mark everything up with comments, so you can come back and read the code without having to rewatch the video, although your reviews are greatly appreciated. So yeah, I'll leave a link for that in the description below, so make sure to check it out. And another thing is I'll leave a link to our Discord server. It's a big community for programmers. You can ask for help on your programming projects if you're stuck on something, or maybe you can get some new friends. If you don't have any friends, there's lots of people here. It's growing really fast. You can find lots of people who are passionate about the same things as you. For example, if you like Minecraft Spigot development, you can find lots of people who like that. If you like C++, if you like Java, if you like web development, it's a really, really big programming community. So feel free to join. There's a link for that in the description below. And the last thing I want to tell you is that if you want to support this channel, you can click the join button below this video, and you can join this channel as a member for as low as 99 cents a month, and you can cancel at any time. You get some cool perks like early access to all of my new videos, a cool rank on my Discord server like you see right here on the side, YouTube members, and also you get to see yourself on the screen like you see right now. So if that sounds cool to you, feel free to join. If you don't want to, that's fine. If you can't, that's okay too. I really just appreciate you watching the video anyway. And thank you. Thanks a lot. And that's it. So if you like this video, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe. And peace.